Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
But now I am delighted to be joined by Labour's leader, Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy, very good to see you again.
Morning, Robert.
Actually, I'd quite like to pick up on something that Allegra mentioned, which was a tweet from Brendan Cox, the widower of your former colleague Jo Cox. And he said, in effect, the issues here are the injustices related to this disaster we've witnessed. And he said it's time to lay off the Prime Minister. As somebody who was subject to an absolute barrage of criticism and to some degree hate during much of your time as Labour leader, do you have any sympathy for what the Prime Minister is currently going through?
Look, the issue has to be what the people of Grenfell Tower are going through and what the people of North Kensington are going through at the present time. A disaster happened. A very large number of people lost their lives.
Can I just ask you, a lot of people say she doesn't care. Do you believe she doesn't care?
I think everybody cares to an extent, some to a deeper extent, and some show empathy in a different way to others. But the real issue is not about what we as individuals feel, Theresa May, me, anybody else. It's what those people are going through. And because it's unimaginable that you watch people burnt to death through the windows of a flat because they can't get out. And then you have a very large number of people looking for somewhere to live now because the Royal Borough of Kensington Chelsea doesn't have the capacity to deal with the crisis. Put it another way, every day at Heathrow, planes get delayed. Hundreds of people get stranded, airports all over the world. Hotels are found for them immediately, they're sorted out. 400 or so people, still, most of them have not got somewhere decent or safe or secure to stay in. Somehow or other, it seems to be beyond the wit of the public services to deal with the crisis facing a relatively small number of people in a country of 65 million. Let's look at it.
But you made a statement that some people think was controversial, which is that the vacant properties in the area should be appropriated. How would that work in practice?
Well, I don't think it's very controversial at all.
I think some thought it was controversial.
Well, some people. I'm not blaming you for that. There are a large number of deliberately kept vacant flats and properties all over London. It's called land banking. People with a lot of money buy a house, buy a flat, keep it empty.
But you would seize it forever, or just take it for as long as they're needed? I'm just looking at the mechanism.
Occupy it, compulsory purchase it, requisition it. There's a lot of things you can do. But can't we as a society just think, all of us? It's all very well putting our arms around people during the crisis, but homelessness is rising, the housing crisis is getting worse. And my point was quite a simple one. In an emergency, you have to bring all assets to the table in order to deal with that crisis, and that is what I think we should be doing in this case.
Absolutely. There's also an issue about responsibility. You won that constituency recently, new MP Emma Dent-Coad. She was a member of the Housing Scrutiny Committee at the time that decisions were being made, for example, to put this inflammable cladding on the building. Have you talked to her about how she was effectively party, it seems, to a decision that may well have been disastrous?
I've talked at great lengths to Emma Dent-Coad since her election about all the...
And what does she say about how this happened?
What she says is that she wanted that area to be improved, she wanted the housing conditions to be improved, she wanted a refurbishment to take place of that block, as I'm sure any decent councillor would.
But why didn't she stop this form of cladding being used?
I don't know what information was put before that board about the safety or otherwise of that cladding. The cladding is only one part of the problem. It is a major part, possibly, but not the only part to it. There are also issues of fire safety. There's also the issues of accessibility by the fire service because they didn't have a high enough ladder. There's also issues of the information that was given to tenants and the effectiveness or otherwise of an alarm system. I think we also should just be grateful and recognise the community response actually helped. Muslim people at prayer were awake because it's Ramadan. They rushed around the building trying to drag people out. The community responded in a wonderful way. What's good is the response of all of our emergency services. Fire, police and ambulance were incredible. Paramedics were absolutely brilliant. What is less effective is the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, because they seem to lack the resources to deal with a crisis of this magnitude in their borough. Yet they are the borough, the country's wealthiest borough.
And just briefly before we go to a break, Labour was in power from 97 to 2010. Much of the sort of governance structure, the separation between councillors and the management organisation, was in place for all that time. Do you hold the previous Labour government accountable at all for what's happened?
The inquiry must look at housing structures. In my own borough, we did have a period in my own borough of Islington where the housing service was separated into an arm's-length management organisation. My councillors brought it back in-house because they believe democratic accountability and efficiency requires it to be directly run. I would want the public inquiry to look at the issue of housing structures, because those that manage public sector housing must be accountable, and an arm's-length organisation is inevitably much less accountable.
So just to be clear, the governments of Blair and Brown got some of this wrong?
I was never in favour of arm's-length management organisations anyway, and as I think it's well on the public record, I did have some criticisms of some of the policies followed by the previous government. But to be fair, that government did put a very large amount of money into decent home standards, into refurbishment and improvements. I don't understand why that particular block, Grenfell Tower, was not done a very much longer time ago.
If we could move on to the post-election politics, can I just check, because I saw Diane Abbott the other day and she looks fit and well again. Is she back as Shadow Home Secretary? Yes. She is. So she's back in post.
Diane suffers from type 2 diabetes and suffered a great deal during the latter part of the election campaign, and I had a chat with her during that period, and we felt it was right that she took a break from intensive campaigning at a national level for...
But she's back at the front line in that job. And
she is getting all the support necessary, and she is the Shadow Home Secretary.
Fantastic. And you were under quite a lot of pressure to broaden the...
Me under pressure? From whom?
Well, from some of your backbench colleagues, to broaden the membership of the Shadow Cabinet. You brought in some new faces. Do you think... Well, why didn't you go further? I mean, quite a lot of people thought, for example, bringing in the likes of Yvette Cooper would have been a good thing.
Well, we had a team that has been together in broad terms for more than a year, in some cases for the almost 2 years since I became the leader of the party. I think they performed absolutely brilliantly during the general election campaign. We had the largest ever increase in Labour votes since the Second World War. We gained seats when possibly even yourself predicted we might be losing some.
Not sure I did. I'm not sure I ever said that. Actually, if you look at what I said...
Robert, I was extremely careful. I wasn't blaming you for anything. I wouldn't agree with that.
No. You can blame me for whatever you like.
No.
Anyway, let's move.
But anyway, the point I was making was we have a team together, performed brilliantly during the election campaign. They and the party national executive put together a superb manifesto. And yes, I have... brought in other people. Owen Smith has come in as Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, and I think that's the right thing to do. He has experience there. He was involved in the Northern Ireland negotiations before, during the period of the Labour administration. And so I think that we need to recognise that and recognise that we have a strong team. I haven't yet filled all the Shadow ministerial positions, and so you'll hear about those appointments this week.
We haven't got a lot of time, and Brexit negotiations start tomorrow. Now, one of the things that people find attractive about you is, in theory, you don't do the kind of facing both way politics that your predecessor Tony Blair is often accused of having done, but many people would say that you are facing both ways on Brexit, that you are both appealing to those who are nervous about immigration, who want a harder Brexit, and yet, you know, at the same time, you're trying to pick up those who voted for Remain, and you've got a very unclear policy that's not, frankly, very different from a Tory policy.
I think our policy is pretty clear. It is about tariff-free trade access to Europe. It is about...
Which is what the Tories say they want.
Well, except they threaten to walk away if they don't get the deal they want.
But is that the only difference between you and the Tories?
No. Our priority is protecting jobs and investment. Our priority is protecting trade. Our priority is protecting EU nationals' rights unilaterally to remain in Britain, and obviously asking European countries to do the same, and protecting the rights that we've achieved through European Union membership, employment and environmental and a number of others. But it's also about having a partnership with Europe in the future. We're not threatening to walk away, and we're not threatening to set up a low-tax economy on the shores of Europe. We want to work with Europe, recognising the result of the referendum. Labour has support from those who voted leave and those who voted remain. And we have to recognise the processes that led to that. And I think the general election showed that our idea of an investment-led economy, of greater social justice in Britain, surely in the wake of Grenfell fire, we have to recognise something has gone badly, badly wrong in this country, that predominantly poor people die in a towering inferno because of possibly, in the long term, a lack of public investment.
Jeremy, sadly we're out of time, but I'll be putting much of this to the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, later in the programme. My thanks to you. Let's see what viewers made of what the Labour leader had to say. Allegra.
Well, despite an insistence from Jeremy Corbyn that Labour's not facing both ways on Brexit, there is a sense this morning that perhaps it is. But the Queen's speech will be dominated by Brexit, but there will be some other items in it. In the manifesto, the Prime Minister repeatedly talked about the good government can do. Her first Queen's speech, expected this week, will actually show that the new government can't do very much at all. It will be more like a Queen's haiku, incredibly short. Lots of radical changes she wanted to make, she can't. This is the manifesto, pretty much a historical document now. Here we go. So first of all, come on, animate. First week back, cheers. What's not going to be in it? The DUP has ensured that on pensioner benefits, they've won. They've managed to keep the triple lock and winter fuel payments out. Theresa May wanted to get rid of both of those. Now, over here, the PM had been going to bring back fox hunting and grammar schools. Tory backbenchers were unhappy about those, so we doubt that either of them make it in. And then you, the public, you were very, very unhappy about the idea of scrapping free school lunches, and so it looks like they stay in. And then the most toxic of all, does it animate? No, it doesn't. Cheers. Cheers, Screeny. You all know it. It's social care, dubbed the dementia tax, hated on all sides. Now, a lot of this was about a team trying to save money with unpopular measures they thought they could get away with when they won a landslide. This morning, the Chancellor is now saying the government is in listening mode. Wow, how the world has changed. Robert.
Thanks, Allegra. We'll pick up now on some of that with David and Sarah. David, Jeremy Corbyn, your leader, insists that the party has a clear policy on Brexit that he says is different from that of the government. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's definitely different.
Is it?
From the government.
How is it different?
Because there's nobody really in the Labour Party that wants to see a hard Brexit that exits the single market, that exits the customs union, and I think inevitably.
Well, hang on.
Leads to a situation in which the economy
Keir Starmer, Jeremy Corbyn all say that under a Labour government we would be outside of the single market and the customs union. That's what they say. It's in the manifesto.
I'm not going to disagree that there are Labour voters who voted Leave, and there are a significant amount of Labour voters who voted Remain. I represent a Remain seat. I've been very, very clear that my view, view, in the single market, that exiting the customs union would be a disaster. The mood music has changed since the election.
So just to be clear, you are distancing.
The DUP don't want to exit the customs union.
You are distancing yourself, aren't you, from the leadership on this issue, because you are saying we need to stay in the single market, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah.
And I'm a backbencher, and I'm very clear on that.
And I mean, it is quite interesting.
I
wonder whether, actually Jeremy Corbyn has got this right. I mean, there is a poll today by Global Future where they asked Labour voters, who care about Brexit, whether they wanted to stay in the single market. Overwhelming majority wanted to. So, are you clear that this facing both ways at the top is going to work for Labour?
To be fair, Jeremy Corbyn, who's leading Labour, went into the election acknowledging that in the Labour Party there are differences of opinion. That did well in the country. It did. We got seats in the north, we got seats in London and the south, to give him credit. My position, and a number of us, certainly in London and within the Labour Party, are clear on the single market. But the ground is moving. It's moving because the DUP don't want a customs union.
Well, actually, the DUP say to me that they do want a customs union, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So I've got to come to Sarah. I mean, your party is also now looking desperately split on this. I mean, you know, Philip Hammond plainly much keener on something that looks like membership of the customs union and the single market, even if it isn't formal membership. And then on the other side, you've got Liam Fox saying we want the hardest of all possible Brexit. This is another nightmare for the Prime Minister, isn't it?
Well, the point is there's a range of views in the country, there's a range of views in all political parties, and we need to be honest about that. And the arithmetic in the Commons has changed.
Where do you think the heart of the Commons is now on this issue of the nature of Brexit?
Of course, what we all want the same thing. We all want to be able to have the free as possible trade, but also there is a reality here that there are red lines set out by our EU partners that we can't change. And so there's a reality here. What I would like to see is some people come together. That's what people want.
But do you think? I mean, the Prime Minister said there's going to be a 2-year, session. I mean, it's all going to be about Brexit for the next 2 years. Do you think ultimately we're going to see the parties coming together? Probably forced by backbenchers.
Well, I think that's what the country expects, and I think politicians should be judged by their ability to work together, because the point is there's not a parliamentary arithmetic that's going to back a hard Brexit, however much some colleagues in both parties would like to see that happen. And I think we are going to have to compromise on this.
Would you be happy to vote, for example, against your leadership on this?
Well, the point is that we need to see how the negotiations develop. There needs to be much more involvement of the Commons as we go through, because this is going to have to return to the Commons at the end of the process. So there isn't the parliamentary arithmetic now there for a hard Brexit, in my view. And I would like to see involvement of all political parties in this and a much more consensual approach. But we are not going to end up, I don't think, with a hard Brexit. We'll see lots of sabre rattling on both sides, but I don't think that's what we're going to get.
All very interesting.